You will not be able to stay home, brother. You will not be able to plug in, turn on, and cop out. You will not be able to lose yourself on Skag and skip out for beer during commercials because the revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be brought to you by Xerox in 4 parts without commercial interruptions.
Examining freedom. What is its origin? Where does it come from? Is it divine in its nature? Is it a human concept? You know, can it be given? Can it be protected? You know, can it be legislated? You know, we're going to be examining this idea of freedom, specifically the freedom of like African Americans in America. You know, so I just ask that you guys, you know, look at the whole video through. I'm Paul St. Anthony, you know, and it's just a message that I got from, you know, God, you know, that I felt that I needed to give to others, you know, so we can begin to exchange ideas and come up with solutions to help combat life for us and the things and the problems that we face. So first we begin to look at freedom in the U.S. Constitution, 1776, you know, when it was legislated. We was first recognizing the Constitution as 3/5. You know, that was the agreement that they had. The South wanted to maintain their economic system, and the North, you know, wanted, you know, a greater representation, so they came up with the 3/5 system. They counted every 3/5 of a slave, you know, as a person. That's how the representation was created. So if you look at America as a living document, you know, as far as the Constitution is concerned, and the first place you will ever recognize was its Constitution, and you will recognize its 3/5 of a person, that shows you the actual values and the foundation in which they view you, you know, because in this same document, they wrote, you know, the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness, and these various things about freedom, but yet they didn't enact it for you, because they didn't view you as a whole person. They didn't view you as a person at all, you know, so that's the foundation of your view, you know, from the American body, you know, from its legislation. So then we look at the Willie Lynch letter of 1812. The significance of this was that you never wanted to be enslaved. You never stood there and said that it was something that you actually agreed with. So they were revolting, they were running away, they, you know, they were resisting. So he came along with this ideology. And the idea is very dangerous because it oppresses people, not only physically, but it's psychological oppression. You know, he even said that if you enact the things that I tell you, you'll keep them in bondage for the next 300 to 1,000 years. This is 1812. We're coming up on 2012. That's 300 years. So I think we've been in bondage long enough. The significance of the Willie Lynch letter, you went from being the Negro slave to actually creating the nigger slave. This concept has went on to sustain itself over the last 300 years, but what he wanted to do, he wanted to condition you and break you like a horse. He compared you to an animal, and he felt that you needed to be broken. And he wanted to make the women independent, and he wanted the men to be dependent. If the men can be dependent, that means that they would never build and create for their own, but they will only maintain what you allow them to have. And if the women can be independent, that means they will eat out the palm of your hand, because they will reject the male and listen to what you give them, because you seem to be the only one providing for them and actually giving them something tangible. So he destroyed the foundation of a man and female, and he gave you another reality. It's a reality that we've been bound to for the last 299 years, you know. So the Willie Lynch letter, if you've never read it, it's very significant. You need to read it, because the ideology, the idea of it is more dangerous than anything, because you can govern any body of people under, not just a Negro or a nigger slave, you know. So it's a very dangerous concept. Lincoln wrote the Emancipation Proclamation in 63, I believe, 1863. The war ended in 65. This freed the slaves, but now you've freed 4 million people into a society. 4 million unskilled people, 4 million illiterate people, 4 million, you know, people that you told were less than human, and you're now giving them these governing freedoms. But you're doing it with an iron fist, because they still exist in the South. And the South is bitter because they've lost the war, they've lost their economic, you know. I want y'all to remember something. You know, slavery is an economic system. You were a commodity, you were a product, you know, you produced, you know, something to sustain the economic. They protected you as a commodity, they protected you as a product. So you go on with this Lincoln Emancipation Proclamation, and we move forward from that. Lincoln is assassinated. Thaddeus Stevens, you know, he was one of the the people who worked in Congress who made the suggestion that if blacks were not given the proper resources when freed, they were better left in bondage. You know, he wanted to continue the 40 acres and a mule program that started during the war. It was never legislated, but it was suggested by a general. You know, he wanted to actually break up the monopoly that the slave owners had in the South, you know, on the land and the resources, and give it to slaves, because he knew that was the only proper way to actually free them, you know, was to give them resources of their own. So in 1875, you had the Civil Rights Bill of 1875. The Supreme Court ruled it unconstitutional. They ruled it unconstitutional under the 14th Amendment. They said you could not use the 14th Amendment, which was a slave amendment that guaranteed due process and equal protection, to fulfill and carry out this law. You know, so if you can't use the 14th Amendment, which guarantees equal protection, you know, to actually give people their civil rights, then how civil or what rights are they bound to, you know? So 1875, the Civil Rights Bill, you know, was deemed unconstitutional. Give me some bread, man. It was deemed unconstitutional, and no problem. In 1876, you had Hayes was running for president. It was said that the Republicans lost, because the Republicans at that time were the party that blacks believed in, because Lincoln was Republican, and they struck a backdoor deal with the Democrats of the South. The Democrats of the South said you can have the presidency of the White House. They just wanted you to end the Reconstruction in the South. So your health, safety, and all of these various things were used as a bargaining chip in order for Hayes to, you know, receive the presidency. So he sacrificed your health, you know, your safety in the South, you know, and these troops being there in order for them to attain presidency. Commodity.